Hey everyone, and welcome. Today, we are diving deep into a really powerful story from the Quran's Surah Al-Anfāl. It's a narrative that kicks off with a totally shocking challenge to God and ends with a profound lesson on mercy and justice. So let's get right into it.
Wow. Okay, so right off the bat, we're hit with this. I mean, just think about that for a second. This isn't some humble prayer for guidance or help. Nope. This is a straight up taunt, a demand for total destruction. You've got a group of people so defiant, they're basically daring God to prove them wrong in the most catastrophic way imaginable.
So you gotta ask, right? What on earth brings people to that level of defiance? And maybe even more importantly, when you're faced with a challenge like that, what was the divine response? Well, that's exactly the story we're gonna unravel today. Okay, so first things first, let's really look at the challenge itself. To get why the response is what it is, we have to understand the attitude, the mindset that sparked it in the first place. This wasn't some sincere question. It was absolutely rooted in mockery. And here's the crucial backstory. See, that shocking prayer for punishment didn't just pop up out of nowhere. It came right after this claim. The disbelievers in Mecca were basically saying, oh, this? We've heard this kind of thing before. It's just old stories, legends from the past. We could totally write something just like this if we felt like it. It's a posture of extreme spiritual arrogance. And hey, just a quick heads up on how we're approaching this. Our entire analysis is grounded in what's known as tafsir. You can think of it as the rich, scholarly tradition of explaining and putting the Quran into its proper context. It helps us understand these verses not just as standalone lines, but within their full story and historical setting. So when you hear a demand for stones to rain from the sky, you're probably expecting, some serious fire and brimstone in return. But that's not what happens. Not even close. Let's move into our second section, divine patience and mercy. The answer to this prayer is completely unexpected. Instead of just dropping the hammer, the narrative actually hits the pause button. It explains exactly why punishment was being held back, and it gives two super specific reasons for this restraint. And here they are. It's really fascinating. First, the scripture says God wouldn't punish them while the Prophet Muhammad was still living right there among them. His presence was a kind of protection, a source of mercy. And second, and this is so huge, God wouldn't punish them as long as the door for them to seek forgiveness was still open. The chance for a sincere change of heart was still on the table. This slide just lays it all out, doesn't it? It's this incredible clash. On one side, you've got this arrogant, impatient demand for immediate judgment. And on the other, a divine response that's all about patience, about holding open a window for mercy. The contrast is just stark. All right, so after addressing that wild challenge directly, the passage kind of pivots. It starts to take apart the authority and the actions of the very people who were making these demands. This is where we get a deep critique of their claims to be the spiritual leaders of the community. So here's the deal. These guys claim to be the guardians of the sacred house of worship in Mecca, the Kaaba, but the Quranic narrative basically calls them out on it. It says, hold on a second, you're actually blocking people from getting to it, and your own prayer at the house has become nothing more than whistling and hand clapping. It was all for show, no substance. The argument here is that true guardianship isn't about power or your family name. It's about real, genuine righteousness. And it wasn't just their rituals. The passage also looks at their material strategy, their money. It points out how they're pouring their wealth into this effort to obstruct the message, to put up roadblocks. But then, the verse makes this incredible prediction. That very wealth they're spending is going to become a source of grief and regret for them. And in the end, their efforts are going to fail. So all of this, the challenge, the mercy, the critique, it all leads to this massive fork in the road. The passage lays out a choice, an ultimatum that's incredibly straightforward and brings the whole argument to a climax. And the choice couldn't be clearer. You've got two paths. Path number one is all about mercy. Just cease the hostility, and everything that happened before, it's forgiven. A completely fresh start. Path number two, though, is a serious warning from history. If you go back to hostility, then you'll face the same kind of consequences that rebellious nations in the past have faced. It's a powerful offer for sure, but it's balanced by an equally powerful warning. All right, now we're getting to our final section, and this is where we tackle the verse in this passage that is so often misunderstood and taken way out of context. It includes a command to fight, and it is absolutely essential to see it as part of the story we've just been building. But before we even look at the verse itself, we have to define one key term:
Fitna. In this specific context, classical commentators are very clear that fitna refers to a state of active persecution. It's about oppression that physically prevents people from being able to practice their religion freely. This isn't about a simple disagreement, it's about coercion.
So when the command comes, its objective is framed with absolute precision. The whole purpose of the fighting is to continue until that state of fitna, that oppression and persecution, is gone. The goal is to reach a point where religion can be for God, which means people can practice it freely without fear.
And this right here is the critical off-ramp. The passage is crystal clear. If the opposing side stops their hostility, the fighting stops, period. This is not a blank check for endless war. It is a conditional command tied directly to ending that very specific state of persecution.
And this is how the whole passage wraps up. After all that drama, the challenge, the mercy, the critique, the ultimatum, the final word is one of complete reassurance. It's a reminder to the believers that if the opposition continues, their ultimate trust shouldn't be in their own strength, but in God as their protector and helper.
So that brings us to our big takeaway. We've seen how a verse that sounds incredibly aggressive on the surface was actually met with a lesson in divine patience, and how a really difficult command was framed within a very specific goal of ending oppression. It really leaves us with a broader question to think about: how does digging into the full narrative, the full context, change our reading of any challenging text, whether it's religious or not? It's definitely something to chew on. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer.